Hi, my name is Ivy Burleson, and today I'm going to be talking about the prevalence of human sex trafficking. First thing that we need to do is identify the problem, which, as I said, is the prevalence of human sex trafficking. Human trafficking defined is the action of recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of threat or use of force, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse, or power of vulnerability, or giving payments or benefits to a person in control of the victim. Or the purposes of exploitation, which includes exploiting the prostitution of others, sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery, or similar practices in the removal of organs. Consent of the victim is irrelevant where illicit means are established but criminal law defenses are preserved. It is a global consensus that this is a very real problem and that it exists. The Homeland Security says that human trafficking is a hidden crime. So, analyzing the problem, it's estimated that 50,000 women and children are trafficked into the United States every year. It's the second most profitable form of transnational crime next to drug trafficking. And 70% of women who are first introduced into the commercial sex trade are below the age of 18 when they're first inducted. Prosecution and sentencing for those offenses are far less than the sentences for drug trafficking. It is also prosecuted as a federal crime, and not many states have specific laws or statutes for human sex trafficking. The federal prosecutor's primary concern is to determine if a case can be prosecuted successfully, and they decide if a case goes to trial only if it has airtight evidence. In any market, there is a demand that needs to be met by consumers. So, the solutions I kind of generated for this to combat the problem, first I would say education and heightened awareness. As mentioned before, that 70% of women that are first trafficked are below the age of 18. So in order to protect children, we should inform them early by having like school assemblies. Parents really need to get talking to them, looking out for signs, figuring out what things to do, not to do, how to recognize it, protect themselves. Continued research is a huge part of this as well. We do have that dark figure of crime. It's, as Homeland Security said before, it is a hidden crime, so it's really hard to get statistics and find hotspots or other ways or methods to combat this. Law enforcement should have more education on it. As I said before, states don't really have a lot of statutes or sanctions or laws to prevent human trafficking, but law enforcement should be more involved in this. Whether it is departmental education after they get there, or if it should be a part of their training when they're in the academy. We should move towards treating prostitutes more like potential victims instead of criminals and going after johns or pimps. Stricter sanctions for traffickers. And support for this recommendation is from Bales and Lizay. Every police officer needs basic training on trafficking and how to recognize the warning signs of a trafficking case. The Department of Justice or similar federal agency should invest in the development of a training video or DVD that can be disseminated to all police departments. Another one of my recommendations is to look at other developed countries and see what they're doing, what measures they're taking to appropriately prosecute and combat this demand. Measuring outcomes of policies that are already implemented will help us in further research and give us a better direction of where to go, see what works and what does not work. A report to the National Institute of Justice said that human trafficking is, by its nature, an international crime. While American laws and procedures are unique, there are law enforcement professionals in other developed countries who have extensive experience in investigating and prosecuting traffickers. The Department of Justice and other agencies should identify such professionals and bring them to the United States to help develop training for law enforcement personnel here. Another one of my suggestions sounds kind of straightforward and aggressive, but attacking the consumers. So it's the consumers who create a demand in every market. We should start putting more emphasis on prosecuting consumers. Right here I have an example of child pornography in the United States and our justice system. It's seen by many as a victimless crime. I'm going to go ahead and go to this link here. Oh, where'd it go? Alright, this case right here was in August of this year. around our area. Battlefield man sentenced to only 9 years for child pornography. As you can see, this is Dennis Prince, 64. He was sentenced to federal court to 9 years in prison without parole. He pleaded guilty in January after his computer was identified during an undercover law enforcement operation as sharing images and videos of child pornography on a peer-to-peer file sharing network. On his laptop, they found 175 files of child pornography, which showed children clearly under the age of 10. So that being said, he only got 9 years. Okay. I think this is a big issue because a lot of these kids are never identified and they have to live with it throughout the course of their lives. Once it's out there, it's out there. Also in the article, it mentioned that he had to pay a fine of $2,000 in restitution for over 175 files for kids under the age of 10. $2,000 and 9 years without parole. It's not a very heavy sanction, and it's not a very heavy sentence, and I think that's a part of the problem. I'd like to point out something we've also learned in class. Definitely child pornography is not a victimless crime, and it facilitates the exploitation of children. So my question is, what if punishments were more severe for clients of traffickers who force sex labor? Attacking the consumer. The next issue that I was looking at, the possibility of decriminalizing prostitution. Human trafficking is an issue on a global scale, and most developed countries have laws against it and against human trafficking and how to combat human trafficking. However, in Europe, there are states that have legalized prostitution. Like the U.S., Europe has states that have the freedom to make their own laws. Prostitutes can work legally as long as it's of their own free will and they're not being forced or coerced. It should also be noted that trafficking or prostitution of a child is still illegal in Europe, and also here in the United States, there's only one state that has legalized prostitution, that is Nevada. Many argue that it's because of this that human sex trafficking prevails, and that even though it's legal, the prostitutes are still abused and they're not treated very well. Legalized prostitution does not deter sex traffickers. This constant demand for new and different women is one of the primary drives behind the international trade in women. Holman. Holman's article also recognizes fellow scholar Patrice Seberg, who argues that the legalization of prostitution reduces the black market. Before I started doing this research, I had a very shared viewpoint on this, that if we legalize it and tax it and give it the control of the government, that more concerns would be met here, just like equal opportunity, employment. There are certain rules, regulations, and things that need to be abided by that can help protect women who choose to do this of their own free will. She also highlights that prostitutes are still abused and that brothels and establishments where it's legal, they do very little to help them and would rather protect their customers. I don't think that that would necessarily happen in the United States. I think that employees here are treated a bit better than other countries. We could find a way to make this work. There's an argument for women's health. In countries where prostitution is legalized, health checks and certifications are required. But it's argued that because these health checks are only required for the sex worker, it only protects the customers and not the worker. Hold on. Both sides are lacking in statistics, I believe. I only found one article with any kind of statistics or empirical evidence, and it was an article about the brothels in Nevada, and it covered condom usage and STDs that were being transmitted through here, and it was very little to none over the case of a decade. So I think both sides are lacking in statistics. I think that we're not going to know unless we try, and that these days with the war on drugs, it's been a thing throughout the whole course of my life. Now in my lifetime, starting to see drugs being decriminalized, or at least marijuana being decriminalized, recreational, medical throughout the states. And I think that it's a step in the right direction, and if this works, and if that process works, then maybe this could work. It's only a maybe. We do need to do further research. We do need to figure out better ways to prosecute. We do need to figure out hot spots and better statistics. And thank you, that is my presentation. The next slide will be my references. And that's it.